You have probably scrolled past a photo of the pyramids without stopping. A triangle of stone in a desert filed away next to the Eiffel Tower and the Colosseum as just another old thing tourists visit. But the real story behind that triangle is far stranger than a postcard. It is not a monument. It is a 4,600-year-old unsolved math problem, and nobody has ever agreed on the answer. Start with the list you were probably taught in school, the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Can you actually name them? Most people can get 2, maybe 3. Here's the strange part. That list is not a legend passed down by word of mouth. It comes from an actual book written by ancient scholars cataloging the greatest structures of their time. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon, the statue of Zeus at Olympia, the Temple of Artemis at Ephesus, the Mausoleum at Halicarnassus, the Colossus of Rhodes, the Lighthouse of Alexandria, and the Great Pyramid of Giza. Of those 7, 6 are gone. Not ruined. Gone. No foundations, no fragments, nothing you could stand inside today. If the Great Pyramid had also disappeared, historians admit that the entire book would likely be dismissed the way we dismiss Atlantis now. As a myth, people made up about a golden age that never existed. The only reason you believe the other 6 ever existed at all is that the 7th one is still standing in front of you. That should bother you a little. What else did the ancient world build that we now assume was only ever a story? The pyramid that survived is called the Great Pyramid of Khufu, the largest of 95 pyramids built across Egypt. 230 meters along each side, originally about 146 meters tall, before 46 centuries of wind and sand wore the tip down to its current 136. Historians estimate it was built around 2560 BCE, using roughly 20 to 30,000 workers over about 20 years. It contains an estimated 2.3 million blocks of stone. The average block weighs 2.5 tons. The largest single block weighs 60 tons and sits 50 meters off the ground. Now sit with that for a second. There were no wheels rated for that kind of load, no pulleys strong enough, no engines, no cranes, just people. So how do you lift 2.3 million blocks, one of them 60 tons, 50 meters into the air, with nothing but human labor and copper tools? The oldest theory is the simplest: a giant ramp. Build a straight dirt ramp alongside the pyramid and drag the blocks up as the pyramid grows taller. It sounds reasonable until you run the numbers. Engineers calculated that to keep a ramp shallow enough for workers to drag a 2.5-ton stone without it sliding back down, the slope could not exceed about 5 degrees. To reach a height of 140 meters, at 5 degrees, the ramp itself would need to stretch roughly 1.6 kilometers. That means every single block would need to be dragged over a mile uphill before it even reached the pyramid, and the ramp itself would require nearly as much material as the pyramid it was built to construct, meaning workers would have effectively built 2 pyramids worth of stone to make one. Do the math on time, and it gets worse. Finishing in 20 years would mean placing a new block roughly every 2 minutes nonstop, day and night for 2 decades. No food breaks, no sleep. That is not a workforce. That is a machine that has never existed. So a French architect named Jean-Pierre Houdin proposed something different. What if only the bottom third of the pyramid used an external ramp, and the remaining 2/3 were built using an internal spiral corridor coiling up through the inside of the structure itself, hidden from view? It solves some of the math. It also creates a new problem. To this day, no such internal corridor has ever been found inside the Great Pyramid. You would need a design brilliant enough to hide the very evidence of how it was built. Then there is the workforce itself. Archaeologist Mark Lehner led excavations near the pyramids and uncovered the remains of an actual settlement, a small city where the builders lived. Based on its size, he estimated a population of 20 to 30,000 people, roughly the same number historians believe built the pyramid, which raises an uncomfortable question. If that settlement housed nearly the entire population Egypt had to spare for this project, how do you organize 20,000 untrained people into a labor force precise enough to align blocks to the millimeter? Coordination like that usually takes modern management, radios, blueprints. They had none of it. here is where it gets stranger. No blueprint for the Great Pyramid has ever been found. Not a fragment, not a sketch, nothing. And this is not a simple stone box. Inside there are corridors, shafts, and chambers precisely positioned relative to each other in 3 dimensions, like a puzzle assembled with no picture on the box. Whoever directed this appears to have held the entire design in their head, then somehow transferred it flawlessly to a workforce of tens of thousands without a single surviving instruction. And when the project ended, so did the knowledge. None of the other 94 pyramids in Egypt reached the size or precision of this one. Whatever method built, it was apparently never repeated and never written down. Why would you build the single greatest structure of your civilization and leave no instructions for the next one? The coincidences pile up from there. In the 19th century, Scottish astronomer Charles Piazzi Smith measured the pyramid's proportions and found that its perimeter divided by its height equals approximately 3.416, the value of pi. Pi was not formally calculated until the Greek mathematician Archimedes, roughly 2,000 years after this pyramid was built, and even then only to 3.14. Somehow the ratio was already sitting in the stone 2 millennia early. More recently, researchers noticed something else. The pyramid's height, scaled by a factor of 1 billion, comes out close to the actual distance from the Earth to the Sun, and its precise geographic coordinates read 29.9794 degrees north. The speed of light in a vacuum measured in hundreds of thousands of kilometers per second is 299,792,458. At this latitude, a difference of just 1/100th of a degree shifts your position by over a kilometer. That is an extraordinarily tight coincidence to write off as chance. Then there is the orientation. The 4 sides of the Great Pyramid face true north, south, east, and west, off by only 0.057 degrees. There were no compasses then. The only fixed point available was a star, and even that star has changed over time since Earth's axis wobbles slowly across millennia. The pole star the builders would have used in Draco is not the pole star we use today. Somehow, without modern instruments tracking a star that has since drifted out of position, they nailed true north closely enough that modern engineers still find the margin of error almost unbelievable. None of this proves ancient aliens, and most historians will tell you every piece has a possible earthly explanation. A ramp system we have not fully reconstructed, a workforce more efficient than we credit, ratios that emerge naturally from practical construction methods, coordinates that are coincidental rather than intentional. Maybe all of that is true, but notice what is actually happening when you hear those explanations. You are being asked to believe in a series of individually implausible coincidences, stacked one on top of another rather than a single, simpler, more uncomfortable possibility, that a civilization 4,500 years ago solved problems we still cannot fully reverse engineer today. You live in an age that assumes progress only moves in one direction, forward, upward, us at the top. The Great Pyramid quietly disagrees. It has stood through the entire span of recorded human history, outlasting every explanation offered for how it was built, and it is still doing something you cannot fully explain. You scrolled past a photo of the pyramids without stopping. Maybe you should have stopped.